wrestling fans, you're listening to Wrestling with Johners. Here's your host, John Scott.
What's up, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Wrestling with Johners. This is episode 78, and I've got a very special guest co-host on the line. We'll introduce you to that guest very, very soon. This week, as always, we're going to cover this week's NXT on the USA Network and AEW Dynamite. We also want to cover quite an interesting talking point that's been doing the rounds and quite literally made a dent in the internet on Tuesday night or Wednesday if you're over here in the UK, and that was the return, quote unquote, of CM Punk, and we'll talk about him very, very soon. But just throw out my plugs like I do every single episode, so you know where to find us on social media. On Twitter, of course, you can find us on Twitter at withjohners_pod. That's at withjohners_pod. On Instagram, we're on there as well, so that's instagram.com/wrestlingwithjohners, and go out and search our ever popular, fun, friendly and interactive Facebook community page. Just search for Wrestling with Johners, and that's Johners spelled Johners. And of course, if you enjoy listening to this podcast, please don't forget to hit subscribe so that you can be notified every time a new episode drops. You can find Wrestling with Johners on all popular podcast platforms, including Apple, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Podbean and YouTube. We've been doing a lot of work on our YouTube page of late, so you can go onto YouTube and check all of our audio podcast content and all of our video podcast content as well, and tons of exclusive content, including my vlogs from all the wrestling shows that I've been to over the last couple of years, and tons more. I believe that we're the number one podcast for all of your weekly NXT and AEW Dynamite recaps, along with WWE and AEW pay-per-view reviews and exclusive interviews and so much more. So please spread the word. Please get your friends to subscribe to Wrestling with Johners. Get your family in there as well. Give us a follow on all of our social media pages and subscribe to the podcast and YouTube channels. Help to grow this podcast and get even more people listening to the best kept secret in the world of podcasting, the Wrestling with Johners podcast. You know it makes sense. So on to our special guest host for episode 78. I'd like to introduce you to Darren Kirkby, otherwise known as Mags. So Mags, welcome to the Wrestling with Johners podcast, buddy. How are you today?
I'm amazing. I'm just so pleased and honoured to be a guest on the show. Yeah, since we lined up the episode, I've been really excited to get on there and talk a bit of wrestling with you.
No, well, I've been looking forward to this as well. And of course, you're a busy guy, not only on social media, but in the podcasting world, because you've got 3 podcasts on the go. Now, we were talking off air, but you've got 3 podcasts on the go. You've got Badlands podcast, you've got Why We Watch podcast, and you've got 5 Rounds podcast. So all different kind of subject matter, all fun, friendly podcasts. But to tell us a little bit about each of those. I mean, Badlands is your kind of wrestling-based podcast, but that's based around kind of like Mount Rushmore topics, isn't it? So tell us a bit about your 3 podcasts then, Mags.
Yeah, Badlands is the newest podcast that I've got. Been doing it for about, I think we've done about 30, maybe 40 episodes of it. Me and my tag team partner on that podcast, Paul Toller, we discussed the Mount Rushmores of wrestling. But we don't just like take the normal Mount Rushmore of the greatest wrestlers of all time. We add like a different spin on it every week. We have a different topic. For instance, we've just had one, the Mount Rushmore of wrestling occasions. And then we've had the Mount Rushmore of title belts. We've had the Mount Rushmore of female wrestlers of 2019. So we have like a different spin on it every week. We have a different guest on every week, and it's just a little bit of fun banter about wrestling. I think there's sometimes wrestling can be taken a little bit too seriously, and we like to bring the fun back into it.
Yeah, it sounds like good pub conversation, the sort of thing you talk around a pub table with a pint, you know, who's on your Mount Rushmore of wrestlers or tag teams or managers. It sounds like a really, really interesting podcast. But tell us about some of your others.
Yeah, It's absolutely a brilliant way to describe it. I hadn't really looked at it like that before.
Yeah.
So the next one is the non-wrestling one. It's 5 rounds. That's a kind of like a little passion project between me and my son. Basically, I got all the podcasting set up, and my son and I, we are avid lovers of UFC. So we decided, why not put this podcasting equipment to use and just give our thoughts and opinions on each UFC event. And it's kind of gone from strength to strength after that. It's kind of like a bonding thing between me and my son, and it's grown into like being a fully fledged podcast.
Awesome.
And then the last one, and it's my baby. It's the reason why I got into podcasting in the first place. It's why we watch. I speak to wrestling fans, wrestling content creators, and even people in the wrestling industry about why they love wrestling, what they like about wrestling, what they don't like about wrestling. Just to have a chat with wrestling fans, because that's my whole ethos about wrestling. It's something that you talk about around the water cooler, and that's basically why we watch is a chat between wrestling fans about how amazing this wacky world of professional wrestling is.
Indeed. Well, I'll definitely be checking those out, and I recommend to my listeners that you check those out as well. They all sound fantastic. I love the concept of the Badlands podcast as well, the Mount Rushmores, and whenever we have listener questions, quite often there's a question in there like, who's your Mount Rushmore of wrestlers or tag teams or WCW wrestlers, and it's always good. But Mags, tell me a little bit about your wrestling fandom then. So when did you first, do you have a recollection as far as when you first came across wrestling, and kind of what are your kind of memories of getting into wrestling at an early age?
Yep, I do have very, very vivid memories of how I got into wrestling. It was through my gran. She was one of the first people who we knew to get Scar. So it was like the cool thing. And I used to spend a lot of weekends at my grandma's. And she loved wrestling. She absolutely adored it. So that meant that I did. So around I would have been about 8 that I can vividly remember. We used to sit down, and on the way it went on Sky was that they would have like all the compilation shows, the likes of Wrestling Challenge, WWF Superstars, WWF All American Wrestling, and they'd all be back to back, so they'd be like in a 3 to 4 hour block usually on a Sunday morning. So yeah, I'd be sat there with my gran watching 3-4 hours of quality 80s WWF content.
Sounds like a great way to spend a weekend anyway. And
absolutely.
Who are some of your favourites growing up, and who are some of your favourites now then, Darren?
Yeah, well, around then my gran's favourites were the likes of Macho Man Randy Savage, Hulk Hogan, Jake the Snake Roberts, so naturally they ended up being my favourites. As I've grown and got my own taste, I was a big Stone Cold Steve Austin fan, a massive fan of The Rock to the point where I got a Brahma Bull tattoo. But if I were to be pinned down to a favourite wrestler, it's always going to be Chris Jericho. I think that guy is on my Mount Rushmore of wrestlers at the very, very top. The way he can just reinvent himself, the way that he's stayed relevant for so long. He's just an absolute living legend.
Yeah, and one of the posts I put on our Wrestling with John's Facebook community page the other day was I was interested to find other people's opinion on Chris Jericho and whether he can seriously be in the conversation for being one of, if not the greatest wrestler of all time. I mean, he's been around, he's got a 29-year wrestling career, and like you say, he's like the Madonna of wrestling. He's just reinvented himself, changed his style, changed his gimmick so many times, but he's always been able to get himself over, always been able to get that new that new gimmick or that new version of himself over. And for crying out loud, if he can get a scarf and a light up jacket over, then you're on to a winner. But for 29 years he's delivered, and even more so now. He's probably even more popular and even more relevant now as the AEW World Champion. But what's your kind of thoughts on Le Champion, AEW's Chris Jericho? Do you still like him today? I'm guessing that you're enjoying him being the AEW World Champion.
Yeah, absolutely. when he left the WWE the last time, I thought that may have been his kind of swan song, but it just seems to have gone from strength to strength. And the fact that he's going to the likes of New Japan and facing these huge names and having these massive dream matches, and no disrespect to the rest of the team over there at AEW, I think they've got an amazing roster. If he wasn't the champion, it would take away a lot of the legitimacy of AEW. I think there's not enough praise given to the fact that Chris Jericho has put eyes and viewers onto AEW just by the fact that he's involved with them.
Totally agree. And like I said, I think this is my favourite incarnation of Chris Jericho. I've got to say, I absolutely love everything about him. And because his kind of wrestling style has had to change so much over the years, he's kind of relying more on his comedy, he's relying more on his heel tactics, he's relying more on his kind of antics around the ring. And I think that's kind of what's endeared me more towards Chris Jericho, the 2018 and 2019 Chris Jericho. And I think he's just going to go from strength to strength, to be honest with you. And I don't want to see him drop the championship anytime soon. I think he's really making that bout, and he's making AEW. To be honest with you, I think he's really standing out. But let's switch the topic slightly then, Darren. So this past Tuesday night on FS1. So for the first 3 or 4 weeks, they had it on a Friday, but I think it was their debut episode on a Tuesday night on FS1. And I'm referring to WWE Backstage. And within the last 45 to 30 seconds of Tuesday's episode, you had Samoa Joe, Renee Young, NXT champion Adam Cole, Booker T and Paige in the ring. They were just kind of closing down the show. And then Renee said something to the effect of WWE love to create moments, and that it is their time to create their moments, or a moment of their own. And then you get the music of Cult of Personality by Living Colour. And that is obviously the entrance music for one very remarkable wrestler that we all remember, none other than CM Punk. So CM Punk comes out. He steps through into the ring, goes over towards the camera, and says just when they thought they had all the answers, he changes the culture and tells us that he will see us next week. So we haven't seen Punk anywhere near a wrestling ring for anything of note really since he left WWE in January 2014. I think his last match was the Royal Rumble in January 2014. He's had 2 very unsuccessful matches in UFC. I'm sure Darren probably saw those with his hands in front of his face. Punk was, he's been in a few movies. I think he's in a movie at the moment as well, and we're all aware he's very public at the fact that he auditioned for this role as a co-host on WWE Backstage. He wasn't shying away from the fact. He spoke about it at Starcast just before All Out in August. And he's very open to the whole experience, but we didn't expect for 1 minute that he would actually get the gig or you do the gig until he came out, until we heard his music on Saturday night, and he literally blew up the internet. Now, this gig with WWE Backstage he's a Fox employee. He's not a WWE employee. He's a Fox employee. So although he's going to be a regular fixture on this WWE show as an analyst, he's under contract to Fox to work on FS1 for this Backstage program and not under contract to WWE. But it has got a lot of minds racing. It has got a lot of tongues wagging as to whether we'll ever see him back in a wrestling ring, and more importantly, whether we'll ever see him back in a WWE ring. So Darren, I'm really interested to know your thoughts on everything that went down in this last 30 seconds of WWE Backstage on Tuesday night. It did literally blow up the internet, and it really got wrestling fans, casual, the more general audience out there, CM Punk fans, really excited at the prospect that he's going to be back on TV. And you never know, possibly one day back inside a wrestling ring. But what's your kind of thoughts and impressions on this one, buddy?
Well, before I touch on that, I'll just give a little bit of context. There was a long period of almost 10 years. I think it's around 10 years that I stopped watching wrestling altogether. I kept up with it through like dirt sheets and through wrestling websites, but I didn't actually watch the product, and that was from like 2006 to up to about 2016. So I kind of missed. So I kind of missed all this Punk era. So seeing it, like obviously I've gone back and watched a lot of his work, and is an incredibly talented wrestler, but I didn't have that emotional connection to him that someone who watched him at the time would have had. So it's interesting seeing this like massive furore about him all over Twitter. I mean, even before he came back to backstage, there's been this massive following that every time his name's mentioned, is he coming back to WWE? Is he coming back?
So you're kind of looking at it with a fresh pair of eyes then, really, Darren?
Yeah, kind of, yeah. But also for some more context, I've somehow been blocked by him on Twitter and I have absolutely no reason why, because I've never, or I can't remember ever speaking about him on Twitter. But
that's because you didn't watch him for 10 years, Darren. It must be because of that.
Exactly.
He knows you didn't watch him.
Yeah, but then going on to, obviously, I know that there's this massive fan base for him and everyone's clamouring for him to come back. And then obviously he does pop up on the Fox show backstage, and wow, it set Twitter absolutely on fire. Every news outlet has done video after video and report after report about it. For me personally, I'm glad the guy's back. He had a lot of issues with WWE. He left under a very, very dark cloud. I think the fact that he's under contract with Fox is a little bit irrelevant for me. Looking at it, like I said, from a fresh pair of eyes, if he still had harbored this grudge over WWE, he wouldn't have anything to do with a WWE product at all, whether he was under a Fox contract or not. The fact that he's coming back and he's willing to add to this WWE product, it kind of feels like it's almost like an olive branch being reached out, and for me that signals that it's likely that we're going to see him back in the WWE in some format. Whether that's a match or not, I wouldn't know, but if it was, it would be probably one of the biggest matches of the year. And I know that one of his issues when he left WWE was that he never got to headline WrestleMania. Now that could be back on the cards. It really, really could.
Yeah, definitely. That's an interesting point. He always wanted that WrestleMania main event, and I think he was in 2014. He was promised that WrestleMania match with Triple H that Daniel Bryan eventually ended up having, and then going on to the main event and winning the world title at the end of that very, very memorable night in New Orleans in 2014. And I'm sure Punk looks back at that and thinking, well, what could have been? And although I know he's very friendly with Daniel Bryan, they kind of came up through the indies together, but yes, and like I say, potentially he's got a second bite of the cherry. Potentially he's got a second chance. I mean, I've seen all the backstage stuff and all the YouTube clips from Fox on the YouTube page. And, you know, he looks quite relaxed. He looks happy. He knows he's going in there as an analyst. And the interesting thing, he's going in there quite independent as well. He's not going to be towing the WWE line. He's not being paid by WWE to say what they want him to say. So it's going to be very interesting to, you know, he's always been very opinionated. Even when he was with WWE, he's very, very opinionated. And I think that's probably what rubs a lot of people up the wrong way, to be honest with you. But going into this, you know, being given the instructions to be an analyst and to be independent and to be objective, I think it's going to be very, very interesting to see how it all kicks off next week. Now, I mean, recent viewing figures for Backstage have actually dropped quite a lot, and in fact I think last week's episode only drew about 50,000 viewers. This week's episode did double that, got close to just over 100,000 viewers, which could be seen as a success from the 50,000 the week before. Now I'm expecting next week's numbers to at least double that again. Who knows, with his first proper appearance on WWE Backstage. But the main interest, as I said, is that nobody knows what he might say. Is he going to go there? And I think he's too professional to go in there and trash the WWE. I think he's just going to be objective. He's going to, you know, say it how he sees it, and he's not going to be towing the company line, not going to be towing the party line. So it's going to be really, really interesting to see what he has to say for himself. And, you know, it'll be interesting to see if he's complimentary about the product and who he's complimentary about. But because he's quite an influential figure as well, Darren, you know, if there's something that he doesn't quite agree with or he's quite opinionated about, it could potentially sway the product that we see on Raw and SmackDown each week. Because if you've got somebody as influential as CM Punk saying, well, this isn't clicking or that's not clicking, I think people are going to listen to him. What do you think?
Yeah, I totally agree. For good or bad, he has got that influence. He has got that following. I think you're spot on with the how the viewers will go up this next episode. I honestly think they'll probably do more than double because people are itching to see what he's got to say and whether he's going to drop any hints, whether he's going to be back wrestling or not. Another interesting point that came out a couple of days after his appearance was the fact he'd had like a sit-down meeting with Tony Khan, and he was offered what's been stated as ridiculous money to work for them. So it's interesting that he's turned that down to go on this analyst show for the WWE. To me, that shows that he's still got that love for the company there. Yeah, it's been like a kind of like a love-hate relationship, but it seems like he still wants to help the WWE product. He still wants to be a part of it. And I've got a feeling that this is just the stepping stone for him to make his way back to the main wrestling product.
Yeah, and I think, if the money's right, if the timing's right, if he can kind of rebuild the bridges with Vince McMahon, Triple H, Kevin Dunn, whoever else backstage, I think if that dream match, that WrestleMania match, potentially, dare I say it, that WrestleMania main event with CM Punk versus whoever the champion might be, or whoever the top draw could be next year or the year before, I think he could be swayed. I think he's still got an itch there. I mean, for many years after leaving the WWE, he always said, and he went on record, that he had no interest in wrestling. He never watched wrestling. He would get bored after watching just 8 seconds of wrestling. So how he's going to analyze hours and hours of WWE is going to be interesting to see. I think one reason why he is going to be able to analyze it, and that's the green, the money, the moolah, and I think that's going to sway his thoughts on being able to sit down and watch Raw for 3 hours. I wouldn't mind being paid to watch Raw for 3 hours every single week, because it's hard to do it for free, I'll tell you that. But no, best of luck to him. And I think, like I say, it's certainly the hottest talking point of the week. I think next week is going to be much the same. I think that people are really going to be glued to their screens on Tuesday night, or whenever we get a chance to see it. If we get a chance to see it, I'm sure we'll see snippets on YouTube to see what Mr. Brooks has to say for himself, and who he likes, who he doesn't like, and what his opinions of things are in the current WWE product. So very, very interesting. But thank you for your thoughts on that, Darren. Let's have a little look on another big talking point of the week, and that was this week's episode of AEW Dynamite. So this is kind of like the fallout from Full Gear. So did you get a chance to watch AEW Full Gear, their pay-per-view from Saturday night? If so, what did you think of it?
Yep, I did. I thought it was a very solid pay-per-view. I think a lot of the backlash over the Kenny Omega and Jon Moxley match is very perplexing. Fans wanted an alternative to WWE. They got that alternative, and then the fans have gone up in arms about it. But yeah, overall, I thought it was a really, really good show. I've been labelled on Twitter that I'm this person who is quite down on the AEW product, and that's literally not the case. The wrestling I've absolutely loved. What I don't like is the fact that WWE is always in their mouths, and they're always having these pot shots, and I don't believe that they need to be like that. I think that they've got arguably the most talent-rich roster in wrestling today, and I think they should be letting that speak for themselves. My other concern as well is that they don't kind of push the women's stories as much. I mean, we've got Rio as the women's champion, and what an amazing talent she is. But what do we really know about her outside of AEW? They haven't given us that kind of backstory enough for me, and it's getting to the point where I'm having to go research myself to know about her. And I don't think that a weekly product should be. You should be basically having to set homework to find out about these wrestlers. That should be the job of the company. But all in all, AEW has been impressing me week on week. I've really enjoyed the product.
Yeah, I've got to agree with you, and I do agree with your sentiments regarding character development. You mentioned Ryu there, and yeah, it'd be nice to know the backstory, or maybe get to see some more vignettes or more character building video packages to highlight some of these newer talents that we're not familiar with. Let's be honest with you, until they started appearing on our TV screens through the AEW umbrella. But yeah, no, I thought. I mean, I was going to drop a podcast, a special review episode of Full Gear, but then kind of life got in the way, as I like to say, and I wasn't able to in the end. But I did see the show live. I did watch it all the way through. Thoroughly enjoyed it. So I've seen all the other shows, and of course I've been reviewing all the other shows. But yeah, the main event was very divisive in terms of the hardcore nature. Some people are saying it's probably the hardest death match ever to be seen or come out of North America. I'm sure there's been many more like it, but it was kind of like some people were kind of, it was quite cringy. Some people were turning off. It was too much. Some people thought that it went on too long. Some people thought it was too violent, especially the use of the barbed wire, the barbed wire spider's web. I did feel it got a little bit silly or a bit over the top when they brought out the mouse traps on the board. I thought that was unnecessary, so they probably could have cut that spot out and saved themselves 5 minutes. I thought that the glass spot, when they had broken glass on the canvas and John Moxley had to crawl over the glass whilst he was in the Scorpion Deathlock, I thought that was very effective. But all in all, I thought it was definitely a thumbs up show, and it got a lot of people talking, I think. And if you can get people talking, like you say, around the water cooler about the show the following day, then that's only going to lead to extra eyeballs watching the next show. And that certainly happened this week. But I thought it was a really good show. Thoroughly enjoyed it. I loved the build up to a lot of the matches. I thought the build up to the Jericho Cody Rhodes match was absolutely spot on. All the video packages and all the interviews and all the vignettes they did. So they promoted it like a proper 1980s Ric Flair versus Harley Race, or Ric Flair versus Dusty Rhodes match. I felt that the build was absolutely fantastic. It made it feel special. But yeah, I loved everything about it, to be honest with you. And it has got people on the fence about Full Gear. I can understand the concerns. I can understand the kind of the negativity about it, but like you say, that it's still quite an infant promotion, still testing the waters with a few things. The lights out match, the main event, it was promoted as a lights out match, a non-sanctioned match, and that's certainly what we got. But as long as we don't get too many of those per year, I think that too many will probably be a bit of overkill, to be honest with you. So we'll see what they do there. But on this week's episode of Dynamite, we obviously see the fallout from Full Gear, and there's matches that's going to be promoted during this match. You've got the Jurassic Express versus the Dark Order, Pac versus Adam Cage in what I believe is their third matchup. They only had a match Saturday night at Full Gear, of course, so this is a rematch from that. And a tag match, Chris Jericho, Le Champion, and Sammy Guevara versus SCU for the tag team title. So we'll talk more about their matches very soon. To open the show, we get a video package showing Kenny Omega a few days after the lights out non-sanctioned match backstage, where he's being kind of checked up on by doctors, with Kenny not being cleared to wrestle this week on AEW. However, he was given the news by the doctor that John Moxley, his opponent on Saturday night, was pretty beat up but was still cleared to wrestle, and Kenny Omega looked pretty disappointed by that news. What were your thoughts on this kind of opening video package? It was quite interesting to see Kenny getting checked up on by the doctors, seeing all of his scars and his injuries, but I thought it was an interesting bit of footage. What were your thoughts on this bit?
Yeah, I agree. The first thing that come to mind when I was watching it was how fake the black eye was. It literally just looked like he had black makeup over the eye. Mm-hmm. But I'm absolutely loving this kind of downfall of Kenny Omega. When Omega was, it was confirmed he was going to be involved with AEW. Everybody thought he was going to be the face, the top dog, and I'm really enjoying this almost like Naruto-esque kind of redemption arc that it's seeming that is going on. He just can't build up enough momentum to be that top dog. He can't live up to the status of him being the best wrestler, and he's having these self-doubts. I think that's really a really interesting storyline, and I fully applaud AEW for going down that route.
No, I totally agree. And it's a very interesting story. It's a Kenny Omega that we're not used to seeing. It'd be interesting to see how this develops further down the line. But it certainly is kind of one of them very subtle storylines that they're developing. But I'm enjoying the hell out of it anyway. And then we go straight into our first match. We mentioned a moment ago about Jon Moxley, and he was in the first match against Michael Nakazawa. Now, this match only went about 1 minute. I'm pretty sure it didn't go any longer than 60 seconds. Not even the baby oil that Nakazawa pulled all over his body could protect him against the paradigm shift, the dirty deeds, as Moxley got the easy win here. And after the match, Jon Moxley got on the microphone and he asked if that match counted against his win-loss record. A bit of a tongue-in-cheek remark there from Mox. He said that he told us exactly what was going to happen at Full Gear, and he delivered as promised, and that Kenny Omega will never be the same again. He called Kenny a radical son of a bitch. Mox said that he is on a pilgrimage to be the last man standing. Mox then throws out a challenge to anybody in the back and tells anybody willing to step in the ring with him to kiss any loved ones before they leave the house, and to have an ambulance on speed dial when it's all over, nobody asking for any damn apologies. So a pretty solid promo. We seem to be getting some good promos on AEW, and this was another one here. And then we go straight into our next match, Jurassic Express versus the Dark Order. So my only thoughts when I was watching this match was how much I was missing Luchasaurus. As much as I love Jungle Boy and Marco Stunt, doesn't quite live up to when Luchasaurus was fully fit. But I think we'll see a bit more from him in a minute. In this match, Grayson delivered a senton over the top rope clipping Stunt, who was laid on the ring apron, and the Dark Order really lay into Marco Stunt in this one. Marco did manage to hit a spinning DDT on Evil Ono to eventually make the hot tag to Jungle Boy, who gets a close near fall from a backflip knee driver. And it was Marco Stunt who very nearly won the match for his team from a Dragon Rana on Grayson, only to have the count broken up by Evil Ono. The Dark Order had the match won after delivering their fatality for an impressive win. And after the match, Evil Ono gets on the mic to offer Marco Stunt a position as a creeper, one of their little minions. But with both baby faces getting the holy hell beaten out of them, that was the introduction for Luchasaurus. Luchasaurus came down. He couldn't take any more. He flattened all the creepers, and to make the save for his two good friends, Marco Stunt and Jungle Boy. This was a fun match and a fun cameo to end it off with Luchasaurus. What were your thoughts on this one then, Darren, and kind of how it all ended, and the kind of run-in from Luchasaurus to save the day?
Yeah, I can't not agree with what you've said. I thought it was a really fun match. I actually am going against the normie, and I think the Dark Order are a really good tag team. I know they're getting a lot of grief on social media. People aren't really clicking with them, and it almost seems like that they could be the first flop of AEW. But for me, I think they're more vital than ever, because AEW's tag team division, whilst being absolutely stacked, is very, very face heavy. There's not a lot of heel tag teams, and I think Dark Order filled that role really, really well. But the fact that Luchasaurus got that massive pop, he must be in the top three biggest faces in AEW right now, because the crowd absolutely loved everything that he did. The Jurassic Express, how can you not love him? Even if you're the most jaded wrestling fan and you are bored of the product, they're just so fun. It's just absolutely fun, yeah. And I'm so glad he's back. I just hope he hasn't come back a little bit too early.
Well, he looked fighting fit in this one, and agreeing with yourself, I'm a big fan of the Lucha Express. I think they've got a good look, good gimmick. I think that Jungle Boy's got a really good future. But honestly, I think Luchasaurus, people can laugh at me for saying this, but I think he could be a potential champion. I think he's got the size, his tattoos, he's very muscular, he's got a great look, a great gimmick. I just think he's the package, and having heard him in a few interviews, he's definitely got the passion, and I think they could invest in him. He's definitely one of the future stars of the company, as far as I'm concerned. And then our next match You got the chairman of AEW, Sean Spears, going up against it's a three-man match. This is a triple threat. Sean Spears versus Peter Avalon versus Darby Allin. Or certainly that's the way it started off anyway. But early into this match, we see Joey Janela come down to the ring to attack Sean Spears. Of course, the two of them were opponents at Full Gear on Saturday. The two kind of fought through the crowd and to the back, and then it kind of turned the match into a one-on-one match with Darby Allin getting the quick pinfall win from his coffin drop on Peter Avalon. So following the match, Darby Allin gets on the mic. He's very short and sweet, very brief and to the point, calling out Jon Moxley, telling Mox that he accepts his challenge. And within 10 seconds of the match ending, Jim Ross confirms on Fight TV that Jon Moxley and Darby Allin will fight each other in a match next week. So Darren, I'd love to know your thoughts on what went down in this match, and Darby Allin accepting Jon Moxley's challenge. And we know what Jon Moxley can do in the ring. We obviously saw, everything that went down on Saturday night at Full Gear. We know that he's kind of really turned it up to 11 now since he's left the WWE, and he is kind of without a doubt a different wrestler, a lot more focused, a lot more driven, a lot more serious, and going up against Darby Allin, two kind of fairly two wrestlers not afraid to take a risk. You could consider them fairly, hardcore wrestlers. But what's your thoughts on this match and what's going to go down next week between these two?
Yeah, with the match, I felt that the right person won. Darby Allin is. I know I've given AEW a little bit of grief about not really building up the women's roster and not knowing the backstories. But when it comes to some of the male talent, they've made absolute rock stars out of them, and Darby Allin is certainly one of them. It wasn't someone who I knew a lot about before he came to AEW, but now he's one of the faces of that company, one of the people who you really look out for. The other two in the match, I can't say I'm that bothered about. I don't like the librarian gimmick at all. I think it was a little bit of a backstage joke from being the Elite days that's fallen flat, and it's now way run its course. And with Sean Spears, I didn't mind him as a wrestler as Ty Dillinger. I'm glad that the guy is working and doing well in AEW. I just didn't get the buzz about him. I think the thing is with a lot of fans on social media is that they think that if someone leaves the WWE, they're instantly going to be a big star in AEW. And I think Sean Spears has kind of proved that that's not going to happen. And when Cody said that he's a good hand, I think that's right. I think he's going to be the kind of person who you use to elevate other people, but he'll never be the focal point of the company. But with this match, like I said, I think that Darby Allin winning was the right decision. I am all for a Darby Allin versus Jon Moxley match. That is going to be absolute mayhem. I'm excited for it.
Mayhem is the word. Yeah, definitely. I think it's going to be a one to watch next week. Then we go into our next match, Nyla Rose. We mentioned about the women's division in AEW, and Nyla Rose is another top competitor within that division. She went up against kind of enhancement talent, you could say, by the name of Danny Jordan. Essentially, this was a squash match, as Nyla pretty much destroys Danny Jordan with a Samoan drop and then a sit-out powerbomb inside of 3 minutes for the fairly easy win there. I really like Nyla Rose. I think she's got a good look. I think she's got a good presence, very, very powerful. I think her moves are pretty good. I'm a little bit disappointed that we've not seen a lot of her on TV. There's been a lot of focus on Ryu. There's been a lot of focus on Britt Baker, but not so much on Nyla Rose. What's your thoughts on Nyla Rose? And I think she appeared in an episode of AEW Dark a week or two ago. Now, I haven't caught all of the episodes of Dark, admittedly, but she's certainly not been in any sort of like prominent role for a few months now. But any thoughts on Nyla Rose at all?
Yeah, I think for the first thing that I can say about Nyla Rose is potential. I think she's got the potential to be a massive monster heel. She's got skills in the ring, but it's quite clear that she's still quite green. I think the issue was that she was pushed to being like this monster heel a little bit too early, and then when the title was put on Rio, it kind of fell flat and it kind of took a little bit of the wind out of her sails. Yeah. So I think having these kind of squash matches is a great way to build a backup and build that reputation of being so dominant back. So yeah, squash matches have a use in wrestling, and this was the perfect way to use one to make her look like this badass dominant heel who is building herself back up and will be a massive force in the women's division in AEW.
Yeah, completely agree. And I agree on your sentiments regarding squash matches. I think they need to be used a bit more, especially to get newer wrestlers over. And I always liked them when I was growing up back in the early 90s and I was getting into WWF. And the squash matches would kind of help to build a character. You'd learn their moveset, it would get their moveset over, show how dominant they were. And I think they do definitely still have a place in modern day wrestling, although we don't see half as many as we should. But you make some good points there. Then we get an impromptu appearance from Awesome Kong and Brandy Rhodes on the ring. They destroy Ali, who was in the middle of an interview. They destroy Ali on the rampway. And then they collect a sample of Ali's hair to add to Kong's collection. And then we get an in-ring appearance from Le Champion, Chris Jericho. He comes out to the ring ahead of his tag team championship match later on in the evening, calling himself the greatest of all time, whilst demanding a thank you from everybody in the office, stating that he has beaten everybody put in front of him, including Cody Rhodes, calling Cody once again an entitled millennial son of a bitch. So then MJF comes out to Cody Rhodes' entrance music, which kind of had the fans excited, thinking they were going to get Cody, but then MJF, he trolls the fans as he comes down to massive boos and chants of arsehole. MJF tells the fans that if he didn't throw in the towel for Cody, then their favourite little wrestler's career would have been over anyway. MJF tells the fans that Cody only cares about himself. MJF said that Cody didn't want to keep him under his wing, but more like underneath his thumb. MJF calls himself the new face of AEW. We then get quite an amusing conversation between MJF and Chris Jericho, mostly about MJF joining or wanting to join the Inner Circle, or whether Jericho wanted MJF to be in the Inner Circle. It got very confusing, but it's quite amusing between the two. And there's a funny bit of jaw-jacking between the two during the segment. However, there's one thing that they have in common, and they both agree that the biggest jackass in AEW is Cody Rhodes, according to them. So then they both hug in the centre of the ring. Then Cody does come out. So Cody comes out to the ring. He beats down MJF. He botches a power slam on Chris Jericho that looked pretty awkward, to be honest with you. Then we see the official debut of Wardlow. Now, we've been seeing kind of vignettes about Wardlow on recent editions of AEW. On Dynamite, some of their recent pay-per-views, and he promptly destroyed Cody. So now to me it looks as though Wardlow and MJF have got a bit of a connection there, possibly aligning as a bit of a pairing, and it also looks as if Jericho could be interested in recruiting MJF into the Inner Circle with the common goal that they have of destroying Cody Rhodes. So fun little segment, and as always, whenever you've got a microphone in the hands of either MJF or Chris Jericho, you know you're in for an amusing 5 minutes, and that's certainly what we got here. So what were your thoughts on what went down in this little segment here then, Darren?
I thought it was brilliant. I mentioned about Darby Allin being one of the guys that AEW have made into a rock star. If there was one person who's head and shoulders above everyone else, it's MJF. That guy is absolutely amazing in his role as the cunning, dastardly heel. Yeah. I would have liked this turn of his to go on a little bit more. I was really enjoying the way he was being very snide behind Cody's back, but then sucking up to him. So I would have liked to have seen that go on a little bit longer. But I can see how the AEW kind of booked themselves into a corner with this Cody not being able to challenge for the title again. They needed to get a way out of it that led Cody into another feud, and the turn was always going to happen. It's just come a little bit sooner than I would have liked. I think MJF landing with Jericho is a really, really good move, but it kind of negates the fact that they've got Sammy Guevara in the Inner Circle now. If MJF is going to join the Inner Circle, I think he fits the role that Sammy Guevara kind of fits as like the young, cocky upstart. So I don't know if it's going to be confirmed that he joins the Inner Circle, especially if he's got Wardlow as this kind of like bodyguard / like monster heel to side of him. So maybe the the links with Inner Circle are going to fade away. But yeah, I thought the segment was great. Jericho on the mark is if not the best, he's definitely one of the best. And nobody in this business can draw heat like MJF. The guy is absolutely solid gold and is one of the stars of AEW for me.
Yeah, I've got to be honest with you. I didn't know too much about him before this year, but as soon as he started appearing on AEW, I think it was probably as soon as the rally back in early January. I think it was January the 4th or 5th when they did the rally and they introduced AEW and they announced it was the new promotion and MJF came out. And I just knew that he was an awesome talent. And I know he's been around for a year or so, but he's still quite new to this business. I mean, he's still very young himself in his kind of early 20s, but what a future that guy has. And he's already the total package on the microphone. I don't think he's fully proven in the ring yet. He's not had too many long matches to really kind of show his true ability. But as a gimmick, as a heel, as a talent on the mic, he's got it. And you could tell that Chris Jericho was admiring his kind of talent and his prowess on the microphone when MJF was talking. I think they were kind of MJF could be considered an equal to anybody on the microphone, and definitely a valuable asset to have in your company. But interesting to see what's going to happen in the future, and especially, yes, will MJF join the Inner Circle? I personally hope that he does not. I think he's a good enough talent with possibly Wardlow by his side to create their own little stable or their own little pairing without needing to be incorporated or brought into the Inner Circle. It could, like you said, it could lesser the impact of a Sammy Guevara. And we saw what happened with the NWO back in the 90s where there were too many cooks. And it kind of it kind of lessens the impact of the bigger players that are in there. But interesting nonetheless. I thought it was a really good segment. And to be honest with you, possibly the highlight of the show as far as I was concerned. Moving on to the next match, Hangman Page versus Pac. So this is it was described as their rubber match, their third match. I think they both won a match each. Including Adam Page's victory over Pac at Full Gear on Saturday. So this was a pretty fun match, a pretty hard-hitting match between these two, as you would expect. Now, they've been feuding for a number of months now, dating back to, I think, about April or May. I think they were scheduled to fight at Double or Nothing back in May, and that got dropped for one reason or another that's not been fully explained. Now, in this match, Page dropped Pac off the ring apron with like a sidewalk slam, then hit Pac with a huge moonsault from the top turnbuckle onto Pac on the outside. Pac delivers a solid super kick to the face of Adam Page on the floor. Pac then recovers to drop Page with a German suplex. Adam Page then connects with a brutal lariat, turning Pac inside out. Page then drops Pac with a brainbuster on the outside before delivering his buckshot lariat for a close near fall. Pac then goes he then goes wild, stomping away on Adam Page's head before delivering his Black Arrow, quickly transitioning into his Brutalizer to not only win the match, but to go 2-1 up in their series of matches. So I thought this was a good match. What I liked about this one, Darren, was it was quite hard hitting, quite brutal. Their spots looked pretty real. And similar to the story they're telling with Kenny Omega, the same could be said for Adam Page, where he's had a very, very mixed start in his AEW career. He's probably lost just as many as he's won, and Pac seems to be getting the better of him, to be honest with you. But give us your thoughts on this one here. Like I say, it was only a few days removed from their match at Full Gear. I actually thought this was a slightly better match. It didn't go on for as long, but I thought they got in all their shots, and it looked pretty good to me.
Yeah, in terms of the match, yeah, I agree with you. I think it was the better of all the matches that they've had. And I do agree that Page looks like he's floundering a little bit, again along the same lines of Kenny Omega, where he can't get a good run of wins together. My issue with this, and this is why I'm going to give it like a bit of a negative, is that AEW of their mantra is that they're going to be different to the WWE, that they're going to be the alternative, but they've done something that the WWE gets a lot of flack for. They've given us the same match multiple times over a short period, and WWE have had that with Seth Rollins versus The Fiend recently, and I think it would be unfair to give AEW a pass on this and then in the same breath kind of criticise the WWE for it. So I think maybe they should have maybe a little bit of time between the matches. But looking at the match objectively, yeah, I think it was a really good match. I think the right person won. Pac is on a great tear, and I love the story of him like being angry that his wins aren't enough to get him a title shot. But I just don't see how you have a heel versus heel title match. So that kind of leads me to think that maybe Jericho will have to drop the title before Pac can get the championship. So maybe he's facing Page just to keep him active more than anything.
Yeah, and I'm going back to one of your earlier comments. They do seem to be recycling the same talent, the same matches. You do seem to be saying a lot of similar matches happening week in, week out, with a lot of the same talent. And could that be because being a fairly new company that they just haven't got as deep a talent pool as they would like, or is it that they're just not utilising a lot of the other wrestlers that they might have backstage? I really enjoyed this match, but personally, I hope it's the last match we see from Page and Pac for a little while. And like I say, potentially down the road, we could see the two of them both get involved with one another with the title on the line. That it could be a title program between the two of them. But I don't want to see the two of these wrestle in anything similar anytime soon. Thank you very much. Yeah, it's been good for what it was, but let's leave it alone for a little bit anyway. Moving on, we then get cameras backstage as Santana and Ortiz get into a physical brawl with the Young Bucks. We even had Ortiz dive off the top of a forklift truck. At one stage, Santana sends Nick Jackson through what appeared to be like a bathroom area. And who was on the other side? None other than Orange Cassidy, looking as relaxed as you like, not giving a care in the world. The Bucks and Santana and Ortiz then brawl into the arena as all four kind of fight around the ring until about a dozen or so officials and security get involved to put an end to the brawl. There's a super kick party from the Bucks. They lay out some of the security guards on the rampway. However, Santana and Ortiz, they appear to get the upper hand as the former LAX attack Matt Jackson's right leg with a loaded sock. This segment then comes to an end with Matt Jackson getting slammed through the stage. We've seen that a few times from the former LAX, whilst Brandon Cutler and Private Party come out. They attempt to make the save. Both Jacksons get beat up pretty bad here. It looks like this is set up a match between Santana and Ortiz versus Private Party next week, which is definitely a match I'm looking forward to. I think they've got two very, very talented teams there. But what's your thoughts on this kind of this backstage brawl and how it all played out? And Orange Cassidy looking quite mysterious, stood behind a bathroom door. No questions as to what he's doing behind there, of course. I'm not laying any sort of aspersions towards Orange Cassidy, but it was an amusing segment. But give us your thoughts on this one, buddy.
Yeah, I think the former LAX are amazing. The way they've been promoted in AEW, I know AEW said that they were going to put a focus on the tag team division. I didn't think it would be as high profile as this. I think it was a really, really interesting segment. I don't think that they should have gone to the same kind of well that they went to with the Rock and Roll Express, where they powerbombed them through literally the same equipment box. But yeah, I like the way they're building up the tag teams. One of my concerns when AEW was being a thing, especially with wrestlers being kind of in charge, was that it would be a booking for the boys kind of thing, where it'd be kind of like WCW in the end days, where the bookers were just making themselves champion and never having themselves losing. And the Bucks have definitely not done that. They've really put over a lot of the other tag teams. I mean, they lost in the first round of the tournament to Private Party. The only part that really flummoxed me was, why would Private Party come out to help the Bucks? I don't think that was explained enough to say why they would get involved in that, other than to quickly make a match for next week. And again, that leads on to something else that kind of is an issue, I suppose, how quickly these matches were made. I mean, they literally had a brawl, and then 30 seconds later, Jim Ross was announcing that match had been made for next week. It almost takes away the fact that it's a a TV program, and it's clearly been scripted.
Yeah, like I say, always it's kind of it makes it clear to the viewing audience that Jim Ross isn't the booker. He doesn't have the rights to announce matches, but within 10 to 30 seconds of that segment ending, the match is being announced on TV, and it's like, well, kind of leave it 10, 15, 20 minutes or just a little bit longer to make it sound like it's been discussed backstage and Tony Khan's got involved or somebody's got involved to put the match together, instead of it kind of always been written on the sheet of paper that you're reading from, because you know what's going down for next week. But that's something that did catch me as well. I mean, when the Jon Moxley Darby Allin match was announced, now I think they went to commercials and Jim Ross announced it on the Fight TV bit between commercials, and it's like, Jim, wait until we come back or just leave it a few minutes. And it was almost as if he was just reading off of a page just to kind of get it done and move on to the next bit. And it didn't really add to the drama or the excitement of thinking, well, are they going to have a match and when's it likely to happen? It's like, right, okay, it's just thrown out there. But yes, I agree with you there. That can be improved on, definitely. But that takes us to our main event of this week's Dynamite then. And it's SCU, Frankie Kazarian and Scorpio Sky versus Le Champion, the leader of the Inner Circle, and the Spanish God, Sammy Guevara. I love all these little nicknames they're getting. Le Champion and the Spanish God. It's kind of adds a little bit of an amusing element to the serious nature of professional wrestling, or maybe not so serious sometimes. But this was for the AEW Tag Team Championship. So I'm pretty sure that this match came about after Full Gear last Saturday night, when Chris Jericho mentioned in kind of like the after show interviews that he and Sammy Guevara should be tag team champions due to the fact that they've been undefeated as a tag team, having won 2 matches together before. In this match, SCU looked pretty good in this match, actually, with Sammy Guevara and Jericho bouncing all around the ring for Frankie Kazarian and Scorpio Sky. Jericho Guevara do eventually get the upper hand, though, through their heel tactics. And remember, in this match, Jake Hager is hanging around on the outside waiting to get involved at every opportunity. Jericho and Sammy make for a really good duo, in my opinion. At one stage, Guevara hits a Spanish fly, but then misses a shooting star press. Scorpio Sky gets a 2 count from a hanging net breaker and another 2 count from a slingshot cutter on Guevara. It all starts to break down as Hager does get involved from the outside, launching Christopher Daniels, who's there to accompany SCU, launching Christopher Daniels into the guardrails. The end of the match comes with Scorpio Sky taking it to the champions, getting a close near fall first of all on Jericho from a TKO, and after kicking out of a code breaker, Scorpio Sky actually rolls up the champion and gets a shock pinfall with a roll up, and not only winning the match for SCU, enabling them to retain the titles, but pinning Le Champion, pinning the AEW World Champion. So Jericho goes on a bit of a tear around the ring, throwing guardrails and barriers and steel chairs around the place as the show goes off the air. I really enjoyed this match. I thought, along with the kind of the MJF and Chris Jericho segment earlier on, this was another highlight from the night as far as I was concerned. Really enjoyed it. And definitely match of the night as far as I was concerned. But I think the star of the match, and you could say possibly the star of the night, is Scorpio Sky. Now, I've said this on this podcast before. Scorpio Sky, he's got a great look, really good presence, quite charismatic, and he's excellent in the ring. And he's really coming together as a total package. And I think if ever they lose the tag team title somewhere down the line, Darren, Scorpio Sky could be looked quite seriously as a singles competitor. And now that he's pinned Le Champion, pinned Chris Jericho, could he possibly be earmarked as a future contender, or maybe to have a one-on-one match with Chris Jericho in the future? But I really enjoyed this match. What were your thoughts on what went down and the outcome to the match, Scorpio Sky? Give us your thoughts, buddy.
Yep, I totally agree with you. I think that this was my match of the night. I think that Scorpio Sky looks like an absolute $1 million, and if he's not a future AEW champion, then I don't know anything about wrestling. He like I said, he's charismatic. He's great in ring. He's got a real rapport with the crowd. I think he's learning so much from veterans like Frankie Kazarian and Christopher Daniels, that when he does break out on his own, he's going to have all the tools to be one of the faces of AEW. And the fact that Chris Jericho lost to him just shows how much faith that they've put into Scorpio Sky, and how much Chris Jericho can use his influence to put these guys over, because that's why Chris Jericho's there. He's there to put eyes on the product and to make the people who he's wrestling against look a lot better. And I think he absolutely did that. And with Guevara in his corner, I think Guevara gets that rub as well. So I don't think there was any losers in this match, to be fair. I think everybody come out of this match looking a whole lot better, and Scorpio Sky looks like they're going to be strapping a rocket to him.
Definitely, and I agree with what you're saying. I think everybody in this match came away looking fantastic. I think it was a fun match and a fun ending to the match. I was watching closely the kind of relationship between Sammy Guevara and Chris Jericho in this match. They are quite an interesting couple, duo, tag team, when they are kind of tagging together. And I love kind of Sammy Guevara. He's got such admiration from Chris Jericho, and there was one moment where Sammy Guevara kind of did a pose in the ring, and Chris Jericho came in and did a pose with him, and I thought that was just fantastic. And their kind of their comedy relief video package from last week, which was kind of a bit of a Mickey take of the Cody video package from a couple of weeks earlier. I thought the one they did last week on Chris Jericho was absolutely hilarious and fantastic, and I can watch that 20 times over and just laugh so much. It's just absolutely fantastic. But I love their kind of father-son relationship. It's just absolutely amazing. But a really good episode of AEW Dynamite. I must admit there were some points in there where I got a little bit bored. Like I say, there were some highlights, and I think the highlights for me were definitely the promo exchange between MJF and Chris Jericho in the middle of the show and the main event. I did like the backstage brawl as well, to be honest with you, with LAX and the Young Bucks. But I think the in-between bits, could probably have done without. There's nothing that memorable about the other section, but then that's typical, I suppose, of many wrestling shows nowadays, where you kind of can't hit it kind of for a full 2 hours on every show. But what would you say overall? What were your overall thoughts of this week's Dynamite then, Darren?
I think it's one of the weaker episodes that they've had, but in saying that, they've been so good that this was still a very, very good episode. I still think there's issues with the likes of the cameras cutting to the crowd and missing spots and stuff like that. I don't like the way that Jim Ross commentates now. I grew up. Jim Ross was the voice of my wrestling world, and I absolutely loved the guy. But what the way he's commentating, he kind of takes away from the product for me a little bit. He doesn't seem to know a lot about the wrestlers. He doesn't kind of like promote the action or promote the wrestlers in the matches, and a lot of the times he actually like kind of puts them down, which I don't think is a good move, especially when you're trying to they're in the middle of a Wednesday night war with NXT. I think you should be doing all in your power to make your wrestlers sound like they're the best thing in wrestling today, and I don't think he quite does that. I love Excalibur, and I absolutely adore Tony Schiavone, and I think they're kind of carrying Jim Ross a little bit. But yeah, for a program that's 6 weeks old, I can't really have a lot of complaints, to be fair. I've enjoyed every single week, and this week was absolutely no different.
Yeah, totally agree. And like I said earlier, I'd like them to mix it up a little bit, have different pairings. You do seem to be getting a fair few rematches, but like I say, the roster's probably not that deep at the moment. I completely agree with your sentiments on Jim Ross. I've kind of complained about him on Twitter a few times, where especially when he calls Jungle Boy Jungle Jack, that winds me up no end. And he does make a few mistakes, which they do kind of cover for, like I think he called Jake Hager Swagger at one point during the main event, and things like that you can give him a pass because he's been in the business over 40 years and he is kind of in his more senior days nowadays, but it's almost as if sometimes he just doesn't care as well, to be honest with you. But if we had a couple of weeks with just Tony Schiavone and Excalibur, that would be heaven, to be honest with you. It'd be nice to see how different or how better the product is with just those two, so we shall see what happens there. But I'll tell you what, buddy, let's move on to a little bit of NXT, shall we? It's another amazing show. I enjoyed the hell out of AEW Dynamite, but I enjoyed the hell out of this one as well. So NXT, I have to say that the opening intro to this show was awesome. The show gave us highlights from last week's episode, through with the theme of Slipknot, of course. It was an awesome visual that took place on last week's episode that they replayed on the opening package of Luke Gallows ramming Bobby Fish's face into the container outside when the OC got into a brawl with Undisputed Era. And I don't think it was fake blood. It didn't look like fake blood, but you saw a bit splatter of blood on the side of this container that come out of Bobby Fish's nose. This was a scene that was only brought to my attention after last week's episode. I didn't notice it straight away, but they certainly replayed it this week during that opening video package. The first match that we get hit with straight from the off is the NXT Cruiserweight Championship match. Io Rush, the fairly newly crowned champion, he beat Drew Gulak a few episodes ago against the new number one contender, Angel Garza. So, as you may be aware, Angel Garza qualified for this match after beating Tony Nese on last week's show. But after pulling off his tights at the beginning of this match in the crowd and throwing them down at the feet of Io Rush's wife and children, I bet he wish he hadn't done that when Io Rush came diving through the rope, sending Garza into the guard railings hard. Rush then gets caught off of a low pay as Garza turns it into a power slam on the outside. That was quite an impressive spot there. Garza then gets a close near fall, nailing Io Rush with a drop kick as a counter to Io Rush's slingshot cutter. And already the fans are massively into this match. Rush gets a 2 count from a swinging net breaker. Garza even gets a close near fall from a crazy moonsault fall away slam where he's holding Io Rush in his arms as he does the moonsault and lands on him in kind of like a body press. That gets holy shit chants from the fans. Rush then comes back with his Rush Hour Spanish Fly, a spinning roundhouse kick followed by his slingshot cutter. Garza quickly transitions into his wing clipper finisher but can only get a 2 counts. Rush does his flying frog splash for another close near fall. However, the end of the match comes in a slightly confusing fashion as Rush delivers a second frog splash onto the body of Garza, with the referee counting to 3. However, it's clear from our vantage point that Garza was able to hook his left foot over the bottom rope, but the referee fails to spot this and counts to 3 anyway, giving the win to the NXT Cruiserweight champion Io Rush. Well, I seem to say this after the opening match of every NXT, to be honest with you, but this was a hell of a match and a great way to kick off NXT. So many great moves, a really good story being told between these two, some really good chemistry between these two as well. I don't know whether they've touched in the ring before, but this was just amazing. The crowd were absolutely loving it, and I loved it as well. And a nice bit of drama, a nice kind of way to end the match that kind of leaves it open-ended for a potential rematch, because believe you and me, Darren, I'd love to see this match again. But what about yourself?
Yeah, totally agree. Just before I go on to the match, there's a couple of points I want to touch on. I think that this Wednesday Night War has brought the absolute best out of both companies.
It really has, yeah.
I'm an avid NXT fan. I've watched NXT. If I were to watch one WWE product, it would be NXT, and I absolutely love it. But there was always that concern that moving it to the network TV and doubling the amount of time could make it go a little bit like the main roster, and those fears have definitely been allayed. I think it's an absolutely brilliant product, and they've really, really stepped up in terms of quality and storytelling. And then the other point was I've championed for a long time the 205 guys to be took to Full Sail. I think that crowd that watches NXT would absolutely eat up the kind of cruiserweight style wrestling, and this match absolutely proved that. 2 cruiserweights having an absolutely amazing match, and the crowd ate up every single minute of it. I think this is the way you start a show. You get that crowd hot, and you also get the people watching on TV hot, because that was an absolutely banging match. It's not often that I'm like hands in my head, like, oh my God, how did that pin happen? And I was totally doing that with this. I think, like you said, these two had great chemistry, and it does leave the door open for a rematch. But wow, what 2 absolute studs, an absolutely brilliant match. And it could even be in the argument for match of the year in terms of NXT.
Yeah, definitely up there in the conversation. But to coin a phrase from Jin Ross, our lovable AEW commentator, it was a barn burner. It was a slobber knocker. It was absolutely fantastic. I loved it to pieces. We then get footage of some altercation that took place outside of Full Sail Arena with an unconscious Rhea Ripley and a rather distressed Tegan Nox, hinting towards a mysterious attacker. So who would that mysterious attacker be? We might find out what's going on there then. That leads us to our next match, Xia Li versus Aaliyah. So the biggest talking point after this match was the ending when Xia Li clocked Aaliyah with her finisher, the spinning kind of roundhouse kick or back heel kick directly to the nose of Aaliyah. I know that Aaliyah went onto social media to show pictures of a busted nose and the blood, with her tag partner Vanessa Bourne coming out on Twitter that same day, calling Xia Li the sloppiest person in the locker room. So not so much about the match, but what about that kick that ended it all? And obviously it was a mistake, it was an accident. Possibly been taken the wrong way by Aaliyah and Vanessa Bourne. I don't know whether they're just healing it up or whether they are genuinely pissed. But what were your thoughts on what went down here then? Yeah,
well, obviously, being British, as you know, we kind of get these tidbits on Twitter before we actually get the show. So obviously I knew that had happened. So when that match was coming on, that was the kind of thing that I was waiting to look for. And I think it's a work. I think we're being worked as fans here. I think they are healing it up, because I watched that finish 3 or 4 times, and the spinning heel kick actually makes contact with Aaliyah's arm, and it's Aaliyah's hand is over her face already before the kick even makes contact, and then obviously she goes down, the pin happens, and then the doctor comes in and wipes her nose, and there's blood on it. But I think we're being worked. I think that was a blood capsule moment. I mean, I might be wrong, but I did watch it 3 or 4 times, and she definitely does not connect to Aaliyah's nose with the heel. It's definitely on a kind of like forearm. So maybe a forearm did hit onto her, and it like the power of it made the hand break the nose. But yeah, it does seem a very, very work style end to me. I think there's more to this feud than meets the eye.
Yeah, very interesting. And the only reason why I thought it might have been a shoot and why it might have actually genuinely injured Aaliyah's nose is because I was watching the match, and like you, I was waiting for the move that everybody was talking about that supposedly injured Aaliyah's nose, and I was waiting for it. And I did notice Xia Li, she does lay in a little bit. She does appear to lay in her moves. She's not the softest of worker from what I could tell, which is why I thought when the kick happened, I thought, oh, she's got a little bit too snug there, a little bit too close. But we shall see how that develops. It will no doubt turn into a storyline, because if it was a shoot, if it wasn't, it's not a storyline, they'll work it into a storyline, and that's how WWE work. But it's a little bit of continuity will be good to follow up on there. But a good talking point nonetheless. And then we get to Finn Balor. He comes out for an in-ring promo saying that NXT has become a joke. Balor went on to say that he built NXT, and after he left, a bunch of little boys moved in. Finn then he shoots a Matt Riddle before telling us that he's begging for someone to come down and stand in the ring with him. So ask and you shall receive, Mr. Balor, as Matt Riddle storms to the ring to brawl with Balor both in and out of the ring. And this has all come about after it was confirmed earlier on this week that Johnny Gargano is out injured for an uncertain amount of time with a neck injury. Whether he's going to require neck surgery or not is yet to be seen. We haven't seen him on our screens for a number of weeks now, and he's been removed from the match, or the proposed match, with Finn Balor at War Games. Like I say, with Matt Riddle taking Gargano's place, it will be Matt Riddle versus Finn Balor at TakeOver War Games in a couple of weeks' time. Balor retreats to the back before all 4 members of the Undisputed Era come out to surround the ring, to surround Riddle, before Tommaso Ciampa and Keith Lee come out to support their War Games stablemate, or a teammate, or former teammate, because he's now facing Finn Balor at TakeOver TakeOver, as I just mentioned. Both groups then get into a bit of a verbal war, with Keith Lee congratulating Adam Cole on his recent matches with Daniel Bryan and Seth Rollins, with Lee asking Cole if he's going to stand up to him. Roderick Strong then gets on the mic and tells Keith Lee that Cole deserves the night off, which gives us our impromptu match, which is going to happen immediately between Keith Lee and Roderick Strong. And this is a non-title match for the North America, a non-title match. The North American Championship will not be on the line. But what were your thoughts on kind of what went down here? We've now got Finn Balor versus Matt Riddle at TakeOver War Games. Johnny Gargano is on the shelf. We're still getting these kind of run-ins from the Undisputed Era and kind of the War Games opponents, and kind of building a bit of continuity there with Tommaso Ciampa's team in the Undisputed Era. But it's kind of this weaving a bit of a web between storylines, but it's all kind of making sense. They all kind of do link with one another. But some interesting storyline development here, Darren. What's your take on this?
Yeah, there was a lot to unpack in this section and then into the match. I think it speaks so highly of the depth of talent in that NXT roster that the proposed match being cancelled with Gargano and Finn Balor, that they've just got someone with the quality of Matt Riddle to just step into place. I think that is absolutely amazing. It's dream match after dream match after dream match in NXT right now. I really did enjoy not only this segment. I think Adam Cole's an absolute rock star. He's probably the most over person in WWE, maybe in all of wrestling. And Roddy Strong, for me, is the wrestler of 2019. I cannot remember when he has had a bad match. He's absolutely solid in the ring. Keith Lee, when he first came to NXT, he kind of wasn't pushed. It was almost like he was just there to make up numbers, and they've really, really put him to the forefront, and they're really using him to his potential now. So yeah, this has got all the elements to be like almost a feud of the year kind of like performance between these groups of guys. I'd love to see if they were going to improve on the Bullet Club style story that they had with Cole and Balor and AJ Styles all throwing up the various different signs, like the wolf sign and the guns. I'd love for them to revisit that soon. But yeah, it's just Finn Balor being back in NXT, the potential of Finn Balor versus Adam Cole, Finn Balor versus Riddle, just all these different connotations of matches is just it gives me chills, because this is my wheelhouse with WWE. NXT is the thing that I watch the most, and yeah, I'm just so excited for the future of it.
Yeah, it is exciting. I think that's the word, is excitement. And like I say, NXT is my kind of bread and butter as well. That's my go-to on a weekly basis, and it has been since day one. And I mean, it's almost like I love what AEW are trying to do, and I do admire their product, and I'm becoming a fan of their products. But I think NXT will always be my number one. And when you've got such a strong and deep talent roster as they have currently, the fact that there's no massive need for NXT talent to necessarily go to a Raw or go to a SmackDown, because now that they're on network TV, NXT are just on a level with the other two shows, so they can continue to build this brand and make it even bigger and more important. And so far, as you alluded to earlier, every single episode since they've been on the USA Network, even with it going 2 hours, has been absolutely stellar, and it just seems to be getting better and better. And as if it wasn't good enough when it was 1 hour, we honestly thought the quality would drop with it going to 2 hours, but it's just continued to improve and impress, and storylines have got better and the matches have got better. And yes, some might say it could be the competition factor, it could be the element of AEW, and if it is, then fantastic, bring it on, because I think competition does allow for better product for the fans, better product for the wrestlers. I'm loving the hell out of it, and so far this episode is certainly delivering as far as I'm concerned. But moving into the match, as I said earlier, it was an impromptu match. built there and then, so almost as fast as Jim Ross announcing a match on AEW, this one was kind of created out of nothing. Keith Lee versus Roddy Strong, a non-title match, as I mentioned earlier. Now these two, Keith Lee and Roddy Strong, were kind of 2/3 of the potential match of the year contender from a few weeks ago, when Strong was forced to defend his North American Championship, both against Keith Lee and Dominik Dijakovic, with Strong pulling off a win in that thriller of a match. And it was a thriller. This match was all about Strong using his smarts and his intellect to get away from Keith Lee's immense power. This match was good, but not quite as captivating, in my opinion, as the three-way they had a few weeks ago. And the four earlier matches that we had between Keith Lee and Dijakovic. But it was good, and it certainly built towards the end. It certainly built like a good story. The match definitely picked up when Keith Lee was on the offense, in my opinion. However, Roddy did manage to get a close near fall from a huge superplex on the massive 320-pound Keith Lee. Just then, the remaining members of the Undisputed Era come out to ringside, quickly followed by Riddle and Ciampa to help even the odds. That was until Finn Balor appears from out of nowhere to attack Riddle, including a drop kick, sending Riddle hard into the steel ring steps, obviously building their match for War Games. Lee was soon able to dispose of Roddy with a supernova jackhammer for the 1-2-3. However, the win for Lee was cut short, or the celebrations were certainly cut short, as it queued up an appearance from the Undisputed Era to storm the ring once more, laying in the boots to Keith Lee, Tommaso Ciampa, only until the aforementioned Dominik Dijakovic came out to make the save, quickly disposing of Strong, Fish, O'Reilly and Cole. We then had a handshake between Ciampa and Dijakovic, and then after a tense stare down between Dijakovic and Lee, we got a handshake between those two as well, appearing to add Dominik Dijakovic to the men's War Games match as part of Team Ciampa. So I think that Dijakovic was always meant to be part of this team. He was going to be the fourth person added, but with Riddle going on to face Balor at TakeOver War Games, it looks like Dijakovic is going to make up the third member of Team Ciampa. But once again, a really good match, and it built. The drama was there, the excitement was there, the big moves were there. As you said, Roddy Strong, he's been one of the most impressive wrestlers of 2019, possibly had one of his best years on record. But a nice kind of ending to the match with a couple of run-ins, and Dijakovic coming out, proving that he is a good guy after all to save the day. But what were your thoughts overall on this one?
Yeah, again, it's becoming a recurring theme, but yeah, I agree with you. I think whilst it's not Roddy's best match of the year, it did exactly what it needed to do. It kept the feud going. It kept the feud hot. It increased that buzz going into War Games. And the addition of Dijakovic to that team, it chills. It's chills.
It's mouth-watering.
Yeah, it absolutely is. It's dream matches, and there's no other way to describe it. These are the matches that everybody wants to see, and NXT and just giving them us, and I could not lap it up anymore.
Good man. There's further shenanigans outside of Full Sail with Jessamine Duke, Marina Shafir and Candice LeRae all getting laid out in the same fashion as Rhea Ripley and Tegan Nox from earlier on. We also get kind of a bit of a cameo appearance from Scarlett Bordeaux, former kind of Impact's knockout or wrestler. She certainly is a knockout as well. But her first cameo appearance under the NXT banner. And that leads us straight into our next match, which is Isaiah Swerve Scott, the former Shane Strickland, of course, going up against Bronson Reed. Both of these two were in the NXT Breakout tournament from a couple of months ago. And that tournament was won by a certain Jordan Miles, who's kicked up quite a bit of storm on Twitter over the last few weeks and the last couple of days, but we won't talk about him here. Now, this match was certainly picked up after Scott was thrown over the top rope and to the outside, allowing Scott to drive Bronson face first into the ring post. Scott then managed to get a 2 count from a flatliner. Reed then flattened Scott with a huge clothesline and then a senton. And with Reed going up to the top turnbuckle, Scott wriggles out of a second rope or an attempted second rope tombstone attempt before dropping Reed out of the corner with a DDT. Reed counters with a sit-out spinebuster before getting a 2 count from a Mori driver, similar to Adam Page's Deadeye. And the end of the match came around from a kind of a house call reverse kick and to the back of the head of Bronson Reed by Isaiah Swerve Scott, and hook in the leg to get the pinfall victory. So once again, I enjoyed this match. It was a really good kind of big man, little man encounter. To be honest with you, just my opinion, we had another big man, little man encounter with Roddy Strong and Keith Lee earlier on. I probably preferred this match over that one purely because it was a bit fresher maybe, and it did have a conclusive finish to it. We did have a pinfall. But I enjoyed the hell out of this one, and it's nice to see this newer talent. I suppose going back to what you said about AEW, you've got your Darby Allins, you've got your MJFs getting a bit of a spotlight. They're doing a similar thing on NXT with their newer talents and the Swerve Scotts and the Bronson Reeds. And the Cameron Grimes as well, which I've harped on about on this podcast so many times, certainly getting a good go of things, a good shake of things, and a good bit of airtime since they've gone to 2 hours. But your thoughts on this one, buddy?
Yeah, Shane Strickland is someone who I haven't seen a lot about before he came to NXT, but I have a lot of Twitter friends who absolutely sing his praises, and they've watched him for a long time, and they absolutely love his stuff. And I'm now seeing why. I think he's got immense talent in the ring. I love how the NXT are building him up slowly. They're not like pushing him too quickly and letting like the fans get to know the style of Isaiah Swerve Scott rather than him coming in and going straight to the top of the mountain. I think that this match, I agree with you again, that it was a better big man, little man match than the Keith Lee and Roddy Strong one. I think Bronson Reed is another kind of talent that once he's got over how green he is, he can be that monster kind of heel. Yeah. But yeah, a great match and a great little push for Scott.
Yeah, he's got quite a unique style as well. I mean, when I first saw him wrestle for Evolve when he was the champion, I kind of saw some highlight packages of him in 1 or 2 matches in full, and he's got quite a hybrid style, a mixture of styles. He's not necessarily a high flyer. He can do a little bit of rough and tumble with the hardcore stuff as well, and he can mix it up with a range of characters, as we've seen with the bigger Bronson Reed here, and he has wrestled more wrestlers of a comparable size to himself. But an exciting talent, and like I say, he's got a different style to most of the wrestlers out there, so it'll be interesting to see where that takes him. But he's definitely got the backing and the support of the NXT management, so it'll be interesting to see what happens. And I think he's under that 205 weight limit, so he could be a contender. Possibly, we certainly might be. I think he's been on 205 Live as well on some episodes, so be interesting to see if he's possibly earmarked for a championship match against maybe Lio Rush. That would be a pretty corking match in my opinion. Then we get to Kathy Kelly. She confirms that Matt Riddle will indeed be replacing Johnny Gargano to face Finn Balor at War Games, and that his replacement in the War Games match will be Dominik Dijakovic. So we've already covered that. On to our next match, and it was kind of, once again, a bit more storyline development. It wasn't the match that we were hoping for, but it was going to be a match between Pete Dunne and Killian Dane, and with Pete Dunne already in the ring, Killian Dane gets ambushed on the rampway by Damian Priest, and then all 3 members get into a bit of a heated brawl around ringside. We see Priest take out his frustration on security guards before throwing one of the poor guards over the top rope onto the waiting bodies with a crucifix bomb. Priest then demonstrates his awesome agility with a middle rope step up, step over senton. I don't know how to describe it. I've only ever seen it for one of the wrestlers, and that's Grand Metalik. But when somebody of the size of Damian Priest does it, it's pretty impressive, but he lands onto Pete Dunne and Killian Dane on the outside. And, we didn't get the advertised match, but we certainly did get some storyline development between these three. And more importantly, we have ourselves a three-way match set up between Killian Dane, Pete Dunne, and Damian Priest, set up for TakeOver War Games, I believe. So, like I say, it wasn't a match. It was a bit of storyline development. But the three of them, and I mentioned last week when Pete Dunne faced Damian Priest, and that was a hell of a match. And they had so much chemistry. And I think adding Killian Dane into the mix will add for a pretty exciting, hard-hitting match for the fans, but can't wait to see this one.
Yeah, I agree. We know as British fans that how good Pete Dunne is. He can have a brilliant match with literally anyone.
Yeah.
Killian Dane, probably the unsung hero of Sanity. A little bit of a waste when he went to main roster, and I'm glad he's back in NXT, where he did some really, really good work before he left. And then Damian Priest, when he first came in, after he'd signed from Ring of Honor, it was another one a bit like Keith Lee, where he was having matches, but you didn't see a lot of him. It's almost like he was making up numbers. But wow, this push that he's been getting, and like I said, the chemistry that he's been having with the interactions with Pete Dunne, he's looking like an absolute rock star. I think he's got a great look. He's really took to this Damian Priest character. He's really, really doing well in terms of character development. His in-move ring set is brilliant, and yeah, he looks like an absolute star.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. And I don't know if it's been fully confirmed yet, but I'm expecting these three to have a match at War Games. But that's only how far away are we from War Games? Next weekend. So we're just over a week away from War Games, and that's going to be a hell of a card. And I've never witnessed a bad takeover, and I'm sure you haven't either. So I'm expecting big things from this one. And even like the Brucey bonus and the kind of extra thing for us is we're going to see more of NXT the following on Survivor Series to see how they fare in some of the matches that are being set up there as well. So it's all good as far as I'm concerned. And then on to the main event. And before the main event, it was confirmed on NXT TV this week that Adam Cole will face Dominik Dijakovic in a War Games Advantage ladder match, similar to what we're going to be talking about in a moment. But for the men and the ladder match, Adam Cole versus Dominik Dijakovic, and the winner of that match will get the advantage for their team in the War Games match. So it will turn it into a 2-on-1 and 3-on-2 and 4-on-3 for the winning team, for the winner's respective team, if I can get my words out properly there. But on to the main event, and hands down, awesome match. Absolutely loved every part of this. Io Shirai versus Mia Yim, and similar to what I've just been talking about, this was a ladder match, so that the winner will get the advantage in the War Games match, the first ever women's War Games match, which will take place at TakeOver next week. So just to set the scene, there's ladders all around the ring. High above the ring is a briefcase, similar to what you might find with Money in the Bank. The winner being the first woman to grab hold and release the briefcase, for winning that person's team the advantage at War Games next week. The match was pretty full on from the beginning, with both wrestlers using ladders as weapons, as you would suspect. There's a spot where Mia suplexes Io Shirai onto the ladder, which was laid down in the centre of the ring, and that looked really, really painful. Io Shirai delivers a Tiger Fake kick, a 619 to Mia Yim before dropping her opponent with a flapjack. Yim hits a belly-to-belly suplex, sending Shirai into another ladder, which was propped up in the corner of the ring. Shirai then gets sandwiched inside a ladder. That didn't do her or the ladder any good after that spot. Mia Yim then picks up a ladder, only to have Io Shirai launch herself into the ring with a springboard, drop kicking the ladder hard into Mia Yim's face. Now, this, unlike the spot earlier with Aaliyah and Xia Li, which we're kind of undecided about, this one definitely looked like it hurt and definitely looked painful. Within seconds, we saw kind of blood gushing from Mia Yim's nose. I don't know if it was from her nostrils or whether it was from the upper part of the nose, but it looked like she had blood coming out of her nose and it was broken. She had doctors and trainers and officials come in to check on her, that kind of slowed the match down for a few minutes. But yeah, there was blood literally pouring all over. You could see puddles on the mat. Had the mat not been black, had the canvas not been black, you would have clearly have seen the amount of blood that she lost during that match. Towards the end of the match, Mia Yim gets bundled to the outside, which is where we see Dakota Kai come down to tend to her friend to see if she was okay. We then get a giant moonsault from Io Shirai from the top turnbuckle onto both Dakota and Mia Yim on the floor on the outside. Dakota gets involved once again as she enters the ring to drop Io Shirai with a sit-out powerbomb. This then allows Mia Yim to climb the ladder, and she's very nearly to the top, very nearly has her hands on the briefcase. From out of nowhere, we get the NXT UK Women's Champion Kaylee Ray. She storms the area, slams Dakota Kai into the ring steps. Kaylee Ray then enters the ring and topples Mia Yim off the ladder, with Mia crashing over the top ropes, through another ladder which was set up at ringside, allowing Shirai to scale the ladder and to collect the briefcase, giving her team the advantage in the War Games match next weekend. So crikey, I think I'm exhausted just talking about the match. It was absolutely amazing, and I haven't admittedly seen many women's matches, but if I have, not one of them would be as good or anywhere near as good as this match. I think both women delivered. Both women kind of showed how tough they were. They gelled well in the ring. The spots were hard and painful. The spot with the ladder going into Mia Yim's face looked painful, but as I've always said, any sort of blood you're going to get in a wrestling match adds to the drama, adds to the reality, adds to the excitement. Yeah, I loved absolutely everything about this match. Give us your thoughts on this one. And it looked like Mia Yim took a bit of a nasty landing through the ladder towards the end of the match, and it sounds like she's actually suffered a bit of a rib injury, possibly a fractured rib and possibly a fractured nose, which could potentially keep her out of the War Games match next week. But what have you kind of heard about her injuries, and kind of first of all, what's your thoughts on this amazing ladder match?
Yeah. Again, it's like I'm just keep repeating it, but I totally agree with you. I think Io Shirai is in the conversation for being the best female wrestler in the world, probably alongside Tessa Blanchard. And Mia Yim, I've loved her since she first started with NXT, and even before that. I think she's an amazing talent, and working with these great women in NXT has only improved her. Whereas in the first the match between Aaliyah and Xia Li, I thought that may be a work. There's absolutely no way. I think that this injury is a work. I think she took that ladder clean in the face, and that is a genuine injury. But these two women proved that given the opportunity, that women's wrestling is easily on par with men's wrestling. They went absolutely balls to the wall, no pun intended. The introduction of Dakota Kai, I like that, because you don't know whether she's going to be like kind of the turn, and whether she's going to like basically become the bad guy because she's feeling like jealous that she wasn't picked. And then the introduction of Kaylee Ray, again, another English or another British talent making their way to the main NXT brand. Absolutely perfect addition to that team. The way she helped Io Shirai, I think that Team Baszler looks absolutely phenomenal. It's just setting up for another great War Games match, and I think this is going to potentially be the best, on paper at least, the best takeover in a long time.
I agree. Yeah. And how can they improve on perfection? Well, it looks like the card that they're kind of building for next weekend is definitely improving on perfection. And I mean, the women's War Games match is probably the match I'm looking forward to most at the moment. And the introduction of Kaylee Ray, as you mentioned, that was from out of nowhere. Wasn't expecting her to show up on the scene. The kind of isn't she Dakota Kai angle? Is she going to side? I mean, a lot of people was expecting her to possibly pinch that fourth spot in Shayna's team after being rejected and dejected last week, but then that fourth spot was given to Kaylee Ray. Could could she potentially be given Mia Yim's spot if Mia Yim isn't fit enough to work? There's a few ways that this could go with Dakota Kai, which makes it very, very interesting. So there's a few kind of like fantasy booking scenarios that people will be thinking about between now and next Wednesday or now and next Saturday. After the match, Bianca Belair comes out to celebrate the win with Shirai and Kaylee Ray in the ring, as their team captain Shayna Baszler comes out to join in on the celebration. However, just then we get the SmackDown Women's Champion Bayley. She comes out from the back to flatten the NXT Women's Champion with a chair shot from behind to bring an end to this episode of NXT. Obviously setting up her match with Shayna and Becky at Survivor Series the night after TakeOver War Games. But just on this closing segment, the champion being attacked from behind with a chair by Bayley. I'll be honest with you, my first instinct, and I'm going to say this whether I'm wrong or right, but I thought the chair shot looked very, very soft, and certainly because it wasn't quite in keeping with the rest of the episode. But Bayley's never been known to kind of lay it in as hard as she possibly could. I don't think her new heel persona is quite clicking. It's not quite the heel Bayley that we was all hoping for these last couple of years. But what's your opinion on how this closing segment all went down?
Yeah, I agree with you. The chair shot could have been at least made it to look a little bit more vicious. Again, I think we're so used to a hugging, friendly Bayley that the heel turn hasn't gone down as well as it could have. I don't think the hairstyle helps as well. She looks kind of like middle-aged, like mum doing the school run rather than like heel wrestler. But she's been like the forgotten member of this three-way match on Survivor Series, especially with Shayna and Becky kind of taking the spotlight. So it's good that they've like put her back into that picture to show that she's not just going to be an extra face in the match. So that I do like the way that they're telling that story, and I also like the way that the two main rosters of Raw and SmackDown are coming across to NXT, and then the NXT people are going across to Raw and SmackDown. I really like that kind of like interweaving of talent. I think it's only a good thing, and it kind of shows that NXT is being looked at as on par with Raw and SmackDown.
Totally agree. A really, really strong episode of NXT. So laying any of our biases to one side, the $64,000 question then, Darren, is what do you think was the better show of the week in the kind of Wednesday Night War? Now, just for full transparency, the last few weeks I've gone NXT, AEW and AEW. So the last 2 weeks for me has been AEW. This week, I've got to be honest with you, I've got to flip back and say that NXT was the better show from beginning to end. Of that main event just capped it off a treat for me. But laying your cards on the table, where are you going this week?
It's so hard because whilst AEW haven't had their best show, it was still a very, very good show. And if that is the standard that they're going to be putting out on a weekly basis, I can't see how fans can have anything to complain about. And again, like we've mentioned before, it's brought the best out of NXT, and we've had 5 or 6 weeks of top quality NXT programming. Gun to my head, I would go with NXT being the better show this week, mainly because it's leading to a pay-per-view in a lot closer than AEW is. AEW is kind of in that position where they just starting to build fresh storylines, where with NXT we're getting to like the culmination, the exciting part of the feud. So I think I would give this week to NXT.
Yeah, you make a good point. And probably the reason why I went AEW the last 2 weeks was because they were building towards Full Gear and they were really ramping it up. And a similar story could be told for NXT ramping it up for TakeOver War Games. So, Darren, that pretty much brings us to the end of this episode of Wrestling with Johners. Before we let you go, we can't let you go without you kind of shouting out any social media plugs, any handles, any websites or any pages you want to promote. So now's your opportunity to kind kind of tell any of my listeners where they can reach out to you, say hi, learn about your product, see some of your products, and get in touch with you on social media. But do you have any plugs you want to throw out there, buddy?
Yeah, first of all, I'd like to say thanks for this opportunity. When you reached out about coming on the show, I grabbed it with both hands. I like going on other people's shows. I like to talk to people about wrestling, and I really do appreciate the opportunity to be on your show. You can follow me on Twitter if you'd like. I'm usually in some sort of argument or debate on Twitter with people at DAJ Kirkby, or if you search for Mags, my name usually comes up. I have 3 podcasts, like I mentioned earlier. I've got a UFC one called 5 Rounds, which you can find out at 5 Rounds Pod. I've got Badlands, where we discuss Mount Rushmores of wrestling with a guest. That's at Badlands Pod. And then I've got Why We Watch, which, like I mentioned, is kind of my baby podcast, the one that I hold dear to my heart. It's the podcast where I speak to wrestling fans and creators about how they got into this wacky world of scripted farting men in cars kind of thing, and why they love it so much. And you can follow that at Why We Watch Pod. Why We Watch and 5 Rounds are on the Visionaries Wrestling Network. That's on every kind of podcast platform you can think of: Google Play, SoundCloud, Spotify, Stitcher, whichever podcast app you use, you'll be able to find that. And the same kind of goes with Badlands. That's we recently moved to the Chairshot network, which is one of the biggest wrestling websites on the internet. Absolutely amazing support over there. So you can find that again wherever you find your podcasts.
Well, Darren, thank you so much for helping us out with this week's episode. You've been an absolute star. It's been lovely to get your kind of insight and your opinion. We've spoken about so much in this hour and a half, hour and 35. We've spoken about the return of CM Punk. We've spoken about this week's episode of AEW Dynamite and this week's NXT. So it's been an absolute pleasure and a joy to have you on. I'd love to get you back on for a future episode. So thank you very much.
Absolutely, not a problem. And it would be our honour to have you on Badlands for an episode, or I'll definitely like to hear your story on Why We Watch. So we should definitely schedule that in the very near future. And if you ever fancy giving us a review of a UFC show, you are more than welcome on 5 Rounds. I love this wrestling community that we've all helped build up, and the more podcast that I can interact with, and the more people I can have on my show, it kind of brings the scene up. So yeah, absolutely. Again, thank you for allowing me this opportunity to come on the show. I've really enjoyed it.
You're very welcome, and I'm definitely going to take you up on your offer of getting on one of your podcasts. But sounds awesome. But in the meantime, please keep it tuned to the Wrestling with Johners podcast for all of your weekly NXT, AEW. Occasionally we cover NXT UK, although since the introduction of AEW Dynamite, that's kind of taken a bit of a backseat, and we do cover all WWE and AEW pay-per-views and so much more. And if you've enjoyed listening to this podcast, please don't forget to spread the word, tell your friends and tell your family, and don't forget to subscribe to the Wrestling with Johners podcast on whatever podcast platform you listen to this on, or maybe YouTube, so that you don't miss out on a single episode. In the meantime, from myself and from Darren, thank you very much for listening. Have yourself a great weekend, and catch up with you all again soon.